Roald Dahl. If any writer should be called Thrillmaker, he's the one. He has caused more thrills and chills than any of his contemporaries through his morbid and macabre, but always exciting short stories, later turned into the television series Tales of the Unexpected. But he has been equally successful in his pursuit to thrill children. Many of his children's books are already classics, masterpieces like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and The Witches. We sat down with Roald Dahl during his visit to Norway when he was shooting the TV special Way North, 5 Norwegian Artists. He's born to Norwegian parents, and although he has lived all his life in Britain, he never fails to stress his Norwegian heritage. We asked him how he reckoned his Nordic blood had affected him.
Well, I don't know. I have a strong feeling, that it is environment that affects people more than anything. I believe that if I had been born in Norway, to Norwegian parents, and had never lived all my life here, I would have been a different person. I was lucky because from the moment I left school at the age of 18, I didn't want to go to university. All I wanted to do was to get a job which would allow me to travel the world.
And so you did?
Yes, I did. But you see, in those days, they didn't have aeroplanes. We're talking about 1935. And to go to somewhere like Africa was a long way. It was a 2.5-week trip in a boat. And when you went for 3 years.
Well, what did you do in Africa?
I was working for the eastern staff of the Shell Company. It was nothing very special. You had to be trained for it. I was trained for 2 years, and then you charged around the country in a station, an old American station wagon, visiting all the sisal plantations, the diamond mines, the gold mines, and all the rest of them, to see that they had enough oil for their machinery. That's really what it was. And you supplied petrol and oil, helped to keep the supplies going all over the country.
How did you get into writing?
Well, I was working in Africa when the war broke out, and I left my job and joined the RAF and learned to fly in the Middle East and then flew and got shot down and wounded and flew again. And finally I finished up as an air attaché in Washington, about halfway through the war. And they wanted people who had been in combat to publish stories in the American papers to give Britain a boost. And a man was sent to me, a famous writer called C.S. Forrester, who wrote Captain Hornblower stories. And he came to see me, and he said, I will take you out to lunch and you will tell me your most exciting adventure in the RAF, and I will write it, and it'll be published, because I can always get them published, and it'll be good for Britain. So I said, lovely. I was terribly excited to go out with this famous writer. I'd read everything he'd written. And we had lunch, and halfway through lunch, we had roast duck, and he was trying to eat his, and I was trying to tell him the story, and he was trying to take notes. And I said, look, I'll go home tonight and scribble this down roughly and send it to you, and you can put it right. And that'll be it. And that'll save you, and you can eat your roast duck in peace. And he said, how super. And so I did it. And it's a funny thing, when I got home in the evening and started writing it, it sort of went very nicely. And I felt the story growing under me, and so I wrote it and I sent it to him. Didn't expect to hear any more. And a week later, I got a letter from him saying, I was expecting you to send me notes. You have sent me a complete story. Did you know that you were a writer? Here is a check for $1,000 from the Saturday Evening Post, and they want some more.
Magnificent.
Yeah, and that was how I started. And I remember saying to myself, my goodness, it can't be as easy as all this.
Has it been?
Yes. It's terribly hard work. Terribly hard work, but it's easy in the way that if you do work hard enough, then it appears that what I write is enjoyed or bought always. I mean, after that one first story, I sat down in the evenings in Washington and wrote 17 stories straight off, about one every month, and every one of them sold to a major American magazine. I never had a rejection. And so suddenly I was making a lot of money as well as my salary, and I used to have to spend it. I used to go and play poker at the University Club in Washington with Harry Truman when he was a senator then. He wasn't the president. Harry Truman was there, and the governor of the state of Washington, and all sorts of people, and enormous stakes they played. And of course I lost all my money, but that's how I started.
So you didn't start a fortune at the same time as you started writing?
No. But I had a very easy road to walk along in starting professional writing. There wasn't a struggle. The only struggle is that every time I write something, privately I struggle. And perhaps rewrite it 6 times and take 6 months to write a story. That's my struggle. But when it's finished, there's no struggle.
So you're very hard on yourself when you write?
Yes, yeah. And I write, I have always kept regular hours, which is 4 hours a day, 2 in the morning and 2 in the late afternoon, and 7 days a week.
So you can control inspiration then?
Yes, writing is not inspiration, you know, it's not. It's keeping your bottom on the seat and working, really is. And the ideas that you get, if they're amusing or inventive or original, they come while you're working at the desk, always.
Not when you're walking in the...
No, not when you're walking in the fields or shaving or in the bath. No, they don't. It blossoms while you're at the desk.
Short stories have been your medium. You started out by writing short stories and have only written 1 novel, as far as I know. Why is this expression so easy for you?
I don't know. I think, I think I do know. I'm wrong in saying I don't know. I know why I've chosen it. First of all, I got launched into it by that first story that I wrote, which I told you about, which wasn't a story, it was a report of real action. But I have such a terror of boring the reader and of having the reader close the book and throw it away and say, oh God, isn't this boring, isn't it slow? That I always condense my work into a short and shorter and shorter, and when I'm rewriting it I try to cut out every possible sentence which doesn't mean anything or isn't useful, because I have this terror of the reader throwing the book away. And then I began to have children of my own, and again, without any thought of ever wanting to write a children's book, I used to try to make them up a story every night, which lots of fathers and mothers do. And I found it rather difficult to make a good one every night. But now and again I would make one, and the next night they would say, do go on with the one you were telling us last night about the peach that grew and grew or something. And when this went on for several nights with one story, which was about the peach that never stopped growing, I thought, well, why shouldn't I try and write that, you see? And I think I was probably hunting for a short story plot, and I'd run out of them because they are hard to find, good plots. So I sat down and started writing James and the Giant Peach. And I enjoyed writing it, you see, very much, and doing the little bits of poetry and verse in it. And it was published, and it did quite well. I thought, well, I'll do another. So I did Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Which now is a classic.
Yes, it's 21 years old now, this year. And I think we sell more of them today than any other time when it first came out. And I enjoyed it so much that I went on doing children's books, just putting in an occasional short story here and there.
But you are an artist who have spent quite a lot of time in the limelight. Why have you chosen to be so visible?
Well, it's a good question, that, because I used to store up my short stories for a long time, for many years. I didn't let them trickle out one by one to television. I sold about 4 to Hitchcock long ago, but only the single rights. I could use them again. But then I kept them all. And when I had about 25 or 30, I thought, well, it really would make a nice little TV series. And I suggested it to a producer called Sir John Wolfe, who runs Anglia Television. And he jumped at it, and we made them. But then there came the question of who was going to introduce them. And first they tried Peter Ustinov, and they went to Paris and they shot him doing one of those introductions, and it simply did not work. That's all. I don't know why, but the thing either works or it doesn't work. Then they tried my wife, who I was married to then, Patricia Neal, and that didn't work. And they were in rather a fix. And so somebody said, well, he's not an actor, but why don't you try the old man himself, you see? And so I had a go, and they thought it was all right. Actually, if I would much rather see the writer of the stories introducing him. If, let's say, Somerset Maugham had a series going, I'd much rather see him and see what he looks like than see an actor who has nothing to do with it at all.
What's your daily routine? When does Roald Dahl get up in the morning?
Well, you've got to remember, I'm not a young boy anymore, and I shall be 70 next year. My body is, I've had so many operations, I'm tied together with bits of string. I've had 2 hip replacements. My spine's been operated on many times from an airplane crash, and this year I had 3 massive operations on my tummy, but I'm all right there. But I'm a bit of a wreck physically, so I take it easy. And I wake up and I listen to the morning news on the radio, either at 7 or at 8 o'clock, quite often at 7. And then about 5 mornings out of 7, my lovely wife goes and gets the breakfast and brings it to me. And about 2 mornings out of 7, I get it for her, which is a sort of nice compromise. And we sit in bed and eat our breakfast and read the Times. And we order 2 copies of the Times because that's the only paper we like reading, so we have 1 each. Then I slowly get up and I have a bath, and I lie in it. I do a lot of thinking. I said to you earlier on in the program that I only did thinking at the desk, but I must admit that I sometimes lie in the bath and do thinking in the hot bath. And once, a couple of weeks ago, I went to sleep in it, and I woke up when the water was lukewarm. So I have my bath and go very slowly, and at 10 o'clock my secretary arrives, and there is an immense pile of mail, and she whistles through it and takes all the fan mail away, which comes from all over the world. And the average was every morning, maybe 200 or 300 letters.
Mostly from children?
From children and school teachers and parents. And you can always tell them. And she takes them away, and she's very, very good, and she sorts them out and she reads them, and then she brings them. That morning at 10 o'clock, she brings me the letters that she's opened the day before, and we go through them. Very fast and very efficiently. She's very fast. And we reply to everyone that deserves a reply, including a little 5-year-old child who's written very carefully a letter, in her own home, on her own. And then at 10:30, I fill a thermos with hot coffee and take a mug in my hand and walk up to my work hut, which is away from the house, up in the apple orchard, about 150 meters from the house. And I go into this splendid room, which I really enjoy because it's so comfortable. There's an armchair. I don't sit up at a desk. I lie back in an armchair, and I put my feet up on a trunk, which I've filled with wood to make it hard. And the trunk is tied to the legs of the chair with bits of wire so that I can put my feet on the trunk like that and push, and it won't go away. And so I get up there and I get really comfortable. And I take a writing board, which I've made myself, and I put it on the arms of the armchair. And underneath it, I put a roll of thick paper so that the writing board slopes exactly where I want it. And I have 6 pencils, and I sharpen them, and I pour myself a coffee, and I feel very comfortable. I feel more comfortable still because no one else has ever been up into that hut. It hasn't been cleaned for 20 years. The floor hasn't been swept. And the only thing that's clean is my writing board. I have a clothes brush, and I sweep it every morning because it's full of little bits of eraser that I've been rubbing things out with.
So you're not typing, you're actually writing?
I can't type, no. I write it in pencil on yellow ruled paper, and throw a lot of it away into the waste paper basket, which is just there, or rewrite it. One nearly always rewrites what one's written the day before, completely, and again the next day.
So how long time do you spend on writing a children's book now, I mean, on an average?
Well, an average length one, I would think it's 9 months to a year. The shorter ones, like George's Marvelous Medicine, that would be 6 months, but a good one, a big one, it would be a year.
Finally, Roald Dahl, what qualities do you have that have made you such an eminent writer?
Oh goodness, I couldn't tell you that. I can tell you one, and that is that you have to, as with anything that you do well, you have to have a kind of drive. But that applies to almost any work that you can think of, whether it's your work or the person photographing this particular film, or who it is. If you're going to be successful, you've got to have what I call drive. You've got to go, and you don't give up. And you have, that I suppose goes with ambition, doesn't it, to succeed?
And you've had ambitions from day one?
Yes, I've never wanted to be anything special, actually. I've always had drives. If I set out to do a thing, I'm jolly well going to finish it and do it properly. And I'm not the only one who has that. Half the world has it. The other half doesn't, and that's the trouble.